from Ashok B. Sharma. The broadcast is live actually.
Wait, Venkat. Now we are going to go live, then you start formally.
Yeah, okay. Well, a warm welcome to Professor ASHUTOSH Sharma, our chief guest in this webinar or video conference. Thank you very much, Professor. It's a pleasure having you with us, and
Thank you.
Namaskar. We want to congratulate you on the Department of Science and Technology celebrating its 50th anniversary this year, which is wonderful.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. Friends, I want to introduce Professor Sharma. He has been Secretary of the Department of Science and Technology since January 2015. Since then, he has helped introduce several new programs, related to infrastructure, human capacity building, innovation and startups, R&D in advanced manufacturing, waste processing, clean energy and cyber physical systems, industry and academia, cooperation, major international collaborations, and so on. And he received his PhD from the State University of New York at Buffalo. He has a master's from the Pennsylvania State University and a BTech from our own Indian Institute of Technology in Kanpur, where he has been a professor since 1997. He held very important positions there, and he was a founding coordinator of the Nanosciences Center and Advanced Imaging Center at the IIT in Kanpur. His research contributions are highly interdisciplinary. He has published over 340 peer-reviewed papers. He has filed over 15 patents and given over 150 keynote conference presentations. He has received numerous awards, including the inaugural Infosys Prize in Science and Computer Science, and his other interests include philosophy, poetry, and art. A very warm welcome to you, Professor. We are delighted that you have accepted our...
Namaskar, Venkat Narayanji. Namaskar, Manish Gupta. Namaskar to everybody who is joining us now.
Yeah, I now invite Manish Gupta to initiate the proceedings and conduct the discussion. Manish.
Thank you, Venkat, and thank you, Professor Sharma, for joining us and accepting our request. We know that these are very trying times, and we know, like every country, particularly India, has been in the lead of using its science, technology, innovation, and prowess in R&D to meet the challenges of COVID-19. So we wanted to hear from you and have you present your thoughts, sir, on what the Department of Science and Technology and your related departments in the Ministry of Science and Technology are doing to meet the challenge, and where do you see this going in the near future?
Indeed. First, let me say there's been very heartening to note that last month and a half, everything got activated with the speed and is now gaining scale. And this was indeed, it was a bit of surprise even for me. Now, this was made possible because there was already a huge amount of knowledge and infrastructure which was in place. And then the problem was clear and present, so that there was a very clear direction. There was a very clear idea about where we want to be in how much time. So that together with the strengths that we already had, and these strengths are reflected in, for example, India being number 3 globally in number of scientific publications. This is based on the report released by NSF last year. So basically, it's just that maybe we did not have as much clear direction and very pressing circumstances earlier. And now that we had it, we could actually move with some speed. Now, the virus is a very multi-dimensional thing. So a whole lot of different kind of people had to work together. I'll just give you 10 or 11 different directions in which progress could be made, could be initiated very quickly. So the first one is, of course, related to the basic sciences. which have a little bit of a mid and long term horizon. Some of it is very fast, but if you are looking at, for example, vaccines, you are looking at repurposing of drugs, which is a little bit shorter term than looking at a new drug, for example. So also looking at the pathophysiology of the virus, what does it do, where does it attack, what are the mechanisms of its action, and so on. So the basic research, it might come from biochemistry, so on. It may come from many different directions. There's also effort which is started on the modeling or with the mathematical modeling, which, as we know, is very important for decision making, for evidence based decision making, and so on, especially asking the questions about, well, if I do this intervention, what would be the result, and so on. So it's like a game. And so we realized that there were more than 30 groups in India which have been pursuing their own models, which is a good thing. But now we got them together to make a network of model makers, so that you make actually a national model that everybody could have some trust and some confidence in it. If all our scientists say, look, this is the model, then that I can take it more seriously. And so that has started, which is very interesting, because the dominant way of working in science is competition, but now we are looking at cooperation. So people are forgetting little bit of their own self interest, and they are getting joining together to make this a success. I think this is something which is rather unique in the world. Now, I have not seen this kind of stuff. I mean, there are so many modelers and there are so many models, but if we can make one model that everybody believes in, I think this would be a huge achievement for decision making processes. Another one, front we started, there are lots of startups in the country, did a mapping, very quick mapping of startups, and saying, look, what do they offer? There were about 700 startups, out of which we shortlisted about 100 which are ready with their products, which could be scaled up, manufactured very quickly. And 50 of these startups are receiving seed money from us even as we speak. So within a week or so, they would receive support to go for manufacturing. And there's a whole lot of products. So they may be related to ventilators, not just for ICU, but outside of it. This respiratory support, PPEs of many different new varieties, even with antiviral coating and so on. So there's a whole spectrum of products and technologies, right? We now have time to get into it, but everything that you hear about every day, okay, that's required. It's diagnostics, whole lot of progress in diagnostics. CSIR is coming up with a CRISPR tool for very rapid, accurate diagnostics. There are new platforms like LAMP, which are coming in very fast, which even globally is something new. Uh, for PCR, the test kits that they are being scaled up. So the third intervention has been looking at the companies which have a product, but they need to scale it up very quickly. For example, PCR testing kits. We are supporting a company which was making 10,000 per day, but now they can go to 100,000 per day. So that's happening. Survey of India is put out maps, geospatial information that's good for making decision making, supply chains, and so on. We also working with 30 NGOs, mid and large size, which provide information to people. They train the trainers in making masks, in making a whole lot of things, disinfectants, and so on. Basic point is, since we don't have a drug and we don't have a vaccine, so we need to manage this. We need to manage the transmission of this, and this is where information is one of the most important things. And this has to be grassroots. It has to be taken to the people who may not be educated, who may not be scientists. So therefore it has to be done in a different way. And it is being done with a scale. Another thing, we are coming up with a white paper on how technology would aid opening up as we go forward in the future. after the lockdown, what are the technological aspects that the country need to pay attention to on priority. um, we're also looking at the role of even the traditional wisdom about managing. This is about yoga and meditation. What kind of practices can be scientifically proven for managing stress and worries, for managing respiratory system, and for managing or boosting immune system. So these are some of the relevant aspects related to this virus CoV-2. Then, of course, our autonomous institutions, CSIR labs, DBT labs, ICMR labs, they've all jumped into this with sleeves rolled up. And also the international connects. Now, the international model is very interesting. We figured that there is not enough time to do the conventional process, which is, give a call, wait for the responses. So people working, one Indian scientist working with someone else, enough time for those processes. So what we do is we are supporting a lot of projects. We give a list of these projects to our partner countries and basically say, look, you have a lot of projects going, let's get these people together. So it's about matchmaking. If they find value in working together, then this could be done very, very quickly, and that process has already started happening. Department of Science and Technology, we work with over 80 countries, of which about 40 are very active collaborations. And of these countries, we are inviting them to join the projects, depending on the mutual interest and if it brings value by scientists working together on this. So these are some other things which are happening. There was also, we are also repurposing our resources. We are repurposing our infrastructure and human resources and all the other resources to basically quickly produce resources for COVID-19 solutions. To give you an example, we started a mission on artificial intelligence last year. Mission is worth about $1.5 billion if you look at the purchase power parity, which means that we set up actually 20 hubs across the country. Now, all these artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, etc., is being repurposed for half a dozen problems and solutions related to COVID 19. To give you an example, very rapid diagnosis, for example, converting a smartphone into a stethoscope and then using telemedicine. So, all the stuff that you get from here, it can be read by a machine learning program. So, it can actually tell you right away whether you need to see a doctor, for example. So, looking at x rays, looking at CAT scan, looking at all of these things, and using machine learning, you could do really wonderful things. So all of that is happening, which is repurposing our knowledge and resources in the service of finding solutions for COVID-19. Um, so there have been so your question basically was, well, what's happening. I think things are happening in every domain which is related to especially repurposing of drugs, plasma therapy, also joining in international teams for new drugs and for vaccines. Diagnostics is very important because we need inexpensive confirmatory diagnosis. If we were to do it at a scale, tracking different cases, that's very important. That's happening. For example, Arogya Setu, as it scales up, would be a wonderful tool for this. Of course, there are new, masks and PPEs and so on, and many very rapid advances in diagnostics. So I'm really, really impressed with the technology that you could drum up in very short time, because any of this in, what you call the normal times, what would have taken 1 year is being done in 1 month now. So this is the acceleration in the speed, which is very, very heartening indeed. And of course, we have done the analysis of all of these factors and which of these factors would be very empowering as we go forward beyond the lockdown period. So, what are the kind of changes that we bring in our structure and processes of doing science, which would propel us forward? So there are a lot of learnings from this as we go forward. Doing, of course, people keep asking, when do we return back to normal times? As we all know already, that there is no such thing as normal times. It depends on the time and space is what we call the normal times. And I keep asking them, look, give me a list of what normal times would you like to get back to? What are the things that you would like to keep? What are the things that you would like to modify? And what are the new elements that one could actually inject in all of this? And this is a very worthwhile exercise that we undertake in science and technology and in innovation. Many interesting ideas emerge from there that I'm sure would become new normal going forward. So, Manish, are you there?
Yes, very much. Um, are you sort of done with your comments, initial comments?
Yeah, I mean, unless you
Uh,
want me to speak about something specific.
a couple of things that came to my mind was, since COVID-19, Prime Minister and ministers are talking about, and you have spoken today about what we need to hasten up our R&D and D and in a cooperative, collaborative manner. So going forward, you talked about basic science research, but going forward, what is going to be the emphasis and how are we going to lay that emphasis on research and development? You talked about repurposing and reorganizing the department and ministries and labs. How are we going to do that? What is happening with that for that focus on R&D?
Yes. So, like I pointed out, actually, nation has very deep strengths in our scientists and the infrastructure which is there and which is reflected in the activity is reflected in, for example, papers that one writes. Our major problem has been translating many of that scientific ideas into market realities. Now, as you understand that this is, of course, it's happening now, and the reason it's happening is because, well, that there is a clear understanding of the product that we need, and that if we were to have that product, there would be a market for it. Now, that understanding basically comes from the industry. It does not come from the scientists who work in R&D labs. It doesn't come from academia. So, so what we would actually do is we want industry to project, as well as ministries which are buyers, to project what their requirements are, and if they're able to define what stuff they are looking for, we can define the parameters, they can define a price level, then I have no doubt that there would be scientists to meet those expectations in speed and within those parameters which are specified. So basically, essentially, you see, it's a combination of two processes: the push that comes from the scientists and scientific organizations, and the pull that comes from market. Now, this pull and push have to be connected to basically make them much stronger, and this is what is happening now, right? So basically, if we can define the direction in a clear way, right? We define the direction in a clear way, and we do it with speed and accountability, and then we look what is relevant in R&D. So there are two different kind of R&Ds. One is what we call basic. So basic is basically knowledge generation, which is new, and of course that has to continue. This is not at the expense of something else. It's not a zero sum game, but essentially saying, look, you continue to generate meaningful, relevant knowledge, but at the same time, that knowledge has to permeate into our entire ecosystem of knowledge, which is the industry, which is the startups. The startups is very interesting because they have come about in last 5 years or so in a big way. The whole culture of startups. Startups is really the twilight zone between what you call academia and the industry. So they are able to talk to both of these people Otherwise, many times things are lost in translation. One speaks French, other speaks Arabic, whatever, right? So we are empowering startups. In fact, in last 5 years, my department did more than what was done in the previous 50 years. So that
Wow.
scale we were already achieving in terms of number of incubators, in terms of number of companies, startups which are supported there, and so this kind of force is already become something very strong. And going forward, we need to bring in more muscle into this. So today, by some accounts, we have about 15,000 or to 25,000 tech startups in the country, which puts us at number three position in the world,
Wow.
not by the turnover, but by number. Okay, but you think about it. I mean, country of the size of 1.3 billion people with 20,000 startups is really neither here nor there. So we need to put a zero in front of it very quickly, maybe two zeros going forward. And so we are certainly working in that direction. Second thing is about empowering the industry for them to see that look, the future is all about knowledge economy. One has to be globally competitive, and all the resources that we have in science and technology could make them globally competitive. I have no doubt about it at all. Right? It's just a question of people getting together and seeing value in getting together, and saying, look, that we would actually translate that knowledge into value proposition. Other words, while we have been focusing historically on inventions, now we also have to bring in innovation, or invention and innovation working together. We have actually no dearth of inventions at all, and they can be made much better at short notice. It's just a question of, are they getting translated into business opportunities? So this is where scientists, the scientific departments, ought to be working much stronger with other ministries and having the right kind of incentives for industry to get into knowledge economy. MSMEs are very important because most of the jobs are generated by them. And don't forget, it is about empowering our young people. We have demographic dividend. So if you ask, okay, what does India offer to the world? It is about these very energetic, educated young people. This window of opportunity in no country has been forever. We have a window of opportunity that extends to another 35 years, give or take 5 years, which means there will be aging of population. But right now, times are great. I mean, we have all these, people who are hungry, who are educated, who are creative, who are flexible, and all of that. So we going forward, and that's who generate jobs, right? So that we take them forward by many different schemes, and startup is one such idea. Other is, of course, huge markets of India, and so we are already very good at design. Most of the multinationals that you can think of, any name, most likely their second biggest design center is somewhere in Bangalore, Mumbai, Delhi, somewhere Noida, right? But this is designed for global markets. So what actually is needed now is that we have end-to-end chain, which means we have basic R&D, we have design, prototyping, manufacturing at scale, and the markets, right? So what is missing in this chain is not our R&D capabilities, it's not our design capabilities, it's not our young educated people. It is basically, and even prototyping could happen now. There is another matter that I would not have time to talk about, but basically it's about manufacturing, right? It's about people working together to bring in new manufacturing. Just to give you an example, all our new technology missions are basically these end-to-end ecosystem. So, for example, this cyber physical systems mission, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on, robotics, Industry 4.0, all of them, they have basic R&D. They have also human resource generation. They have translational aspects. They also have incubator attached with it. They also have a research part, which is a front end, which connects with the industry. So essentially, we are not making different silos anymore. We are saying that industry can leverage all the resources that the government is putting in there. Right, there are no bars on it. Industry can bring their problems, their people, and their money into these hubs. At the same time, they can also be outsourced projects or packages. So basically, all these hubs are empowered to give money to industry as well, not just take it from them. Right? It is all about solving problems. So while our historically science has been focused on tools of solving problems. Now we would be focusing on problem solving by multidisciplinary teams, by interdisciplinary teams, by connecting with the industry right in the beginning so that there is a clear direction about what is needed, what the market values and so on. So all of that is going to happen. So these are the changes that I see, people working together, having a clear understanding of where we want to be, and then with that clear vision, understanding, and direction, all the stakeholders working together. So there's not just it's not just what is desirable. It's not a lip service. This is being translated into actions. This is being translated in terms of schemes. This is being translated in terms of policies and regulations and everything else. So I'm very optimistic. I'm very positive that this is going to bring the new normal in the way we do science and technology.
Well, thank you very much. But gives me a few questions that I would like to follow up. One is, I mean, you talked about a lot of government departments, and they are continuing. India has been spending, I think, 90% of the spend on R&D comes from the government. So
It's
during,
not so bad. It has improved. I think we also compile this data and statistics every year. It's been improving. Today it's more like 60-40.
oh, that's wonderful.
But
Do
if
you
you
think
compare with other countries, it is
industries?
more like 40-60. So we still have some way to go. But anyway, so whole point is our R&D spend, it may be 60-40, 40-60, whatever it is, 50-50. It is still, the absolute numbers are now very high. Okay, so both private sector and this, and the reason for that is very obvious, because if you're not translating knowledge in terms of new opportunities, then somebody has to pay for this R&D, right? R&D is not for its own sake. There's some, so let me qualify that. There are certain areas of knowledge which are for their own sake. After all, we support performing arts, we support poetry, right? All of that are domains of knowledge that society need to support, right? Nobody else is going to, the industry is not going to support it. If I'm going to be working in some area of knowledge which is related to Big Bang, or how the creation started, or the string theory, or the unification of the the grand theory and all that, high energy physics, all of that is the proper domains for the government to support, and government is doing that. But if you look at translational sciences, if you look at applied sciences, which go somewhere, this is where we need partnership. And that partnership would come when, so usually I put it like this in the Indian context, that we have, typically we have Saraswati and we have Lakshmi sitting aloof from each other. I mean, we may just keep saying, look, Saraswati should be chasing Lakshmi, but by all indications, because the nature of these nature of these forces is not going to happen, right? But if Lakshmi sees the advantage in reaching out to knowledge and producing more Lakshmi out of it, then this is going to happen. And so this is a cultural aspect. This is cultural aspect. It requires a little bit of time for change. And I think when we have a crisis, when you have something disruptive like a virus coming along, then people are more open to change. Otherwise business as usual.
Yeah,
Business as usual simply means continuity. It simply means stability, right? And I think most people are more comfortable with that than with disruptive changes. So this is a
my
challenge. But
Yes.
challenge is an opportunity that we need to translate into action.
My question was, sir, that are we seeing big industry beyond the startups and MSMEs? Are we seeing big industry step into this using the same analogy that you
Yeah,
just gave
so big,
of
big
Lakshmi and
industries,
Saraswati?
big industries have a mind of their own, and the support they need from the government is more in the form of policies and regulations. They don't necessarily looking for technology at this moment, which is homegrown. But at the same time, we can bring in a lot of value addition to MSMEs, because MSMEs are really the backbone of the economy and jobs in the country. So while the big companies and so on often historically have been into import model, right? We know that. So there are good reasons for it. It's not to say that while this is necessarily a weakness, in some cases it could be a weakness, in some cases it could be a strength to the overall economy, right? And so therefore there has to be a balance between what is it that we make here and what is it that you could import, right? This is how it is, the balance in every economy in every nation. And so that balance is local to us. That balance we have to find ourselves.
Mhm.
But probably we have not explored it very sufficiently to see where that balance lies with us, because very little effort has been made to harness our strengths all these years.
One more
And
One
yeah,
more
go ahead.
follow up, sir, is that we are talking about a lot of people now. You talked about manufacturing and R&D and product and problem solving will lead to creating products, hopefully in India. Um, do you see FDI coming in because that's the new thing? We are looking at economies collapsing or the economies actually not doing so well, and FDI is being talked about a lot. So, do you see FDI coming in R&D and S&T, especially in manufacturing new things,
And
making
I think this can be a very good model. Certainly, contract R&D, for example. You see, I talked about the fact that we have big design centers employing several thousand scientists and engineers and so on. There's no reason why that cannot be an Indian entity, right? So while right now it is a multinational entity which is integrated in their own ecosystem, but it's the same people, right? Is the same people, is the same knowledge base which is working there. So in terms of producing R&D for the world, that certainly remains an attractive proposition for the country. And manufacturing, as you pointed out, for example, in terms of vaccines, in terms of new drugs or repurposed drugs, um, the manufacturing in India already has a lot of strengths. So if there was a new drug, if there was a repurposed drug, if there was a new vaccine, I have no doubt that India would be a very attractive destination for it. But even going beyond that, so whether you look at, there are new opportunities as we transit into new technologies of clean energy, we transit into electric mobility, and so on. There are huge opportunities also related to sustainable development, because a whole lot of technologies for sustainable development, they must also have a local context, right? This is very important. Most people just don't realize, who are importing, that while they are able to satisfy, if you just copy completely 100%, that's not an optimal solution for India,
right?
right? So while we need import, we certainly need import, but there also has to be some tinkering going on with this. There also has to be some deep thought going on to say what is it that makes sense for me, right? How do we adapt these technologies for them to be more optimal in our conditions? To give you a very simple example, when we started this mission on cyber physical systems, it's fairly clear that this is something which is very global, right? Everybody is working on Industry 4.0, everybody is working on robotics, autonomous vehicles, and so on. But we must remember that the challenges in some other countries that use this technology are maybe not as many young people, right? So, one way to grow economically, the growth model would be to make use of more intelligent machines, or what you may call cyber physical machines and systems. The challenge for India is just the opposite. So it is not about technology. Of course, if there is good technology somewhere, or we develop a good technology which leads to more efficient production, then that technology is going to be used, right? But our own two bit about this, our own deep thinking about this is how to leverage the same technology to create new jobs, to create new skills, to meet the demands that we are not able to meet now, right? So in other words, it must expand the envelope of what we do now and not shrink it, neither in terms of jobs nor in terms of new opportunities, right? So this is a very vital part of that mission. Every time we start a new mission, which where people may say, look, science is really agnostic to where it comes from. Maybe some part of it is, but not all of it. So therefore, we must have our insight into how, using the same science and technology, we would expand new opportunities. And this is happening. This is all integral part of any of these missions. There are new missions which are in the offing. There's a 8,000 crore rupee mission on quantum technologies, which should be out in couple of months. There is a new mission going to be on electric mobility and energy storage. You see, as renewable energy becomes very important, so you have to balance the grid, right, for grid-wide energy storage, which is a huge opportunity, and all of that is happening.
Sir, one more related question, and then we'll go to some questions that have been put forth. You talked about collaboration, and you talked about two kinds of collaboration. One which is happening within India. How much is the collaboration happening within India in terms of ministerial collaboration? This is a question that has come from one of the FICCI members, who's also a member of the FCC.
Yes,
Uh,
see,
the MSME, skill development, all of you, because you just laid emphasis on skilling the younger population, and I think India will have to focus on education models that will now emphasize skilling people in science and technology, R&D, biotechnology, because these are all going to take shape. It's not going to be, and in some ways we expect a revolution. A lot of people being employed, just like IT sector at one time employed people. So is that a push that's happening across ministries working together in this area, because everybody has their own goal, own charter, own missions, own funding. Are we coming together? That's first part, and the second part is on international collaboration. You've talked about 80 collaborations with different countries, and 40 of them are active. But on this particular issue, COVID-19, which countries are we actually actively, fiercely, fast collaborating with?
yes. So there are three which are right on the table now. These are US, UK, France, and I was looking at one more. So whole idea there is that we want to do it with the speed for finding solutions. So I pointed out that we are not really giving a call. Actually, with Indo-US Forum, there is a call which is out, but in other cases, we would like to do matchmaking, right? So we quickly connect groups here with the groups which are working there, so they can explore their mutual interest, and they can see, look, is it of value for them to work together? If they find it of value, then very little incremental support is needed right now, because everybody has their lab, they're already working on it. The question is whether we are exchanging data, information, knowledge, insights into this. If we do that, then we can move much faster.
The second
And
part was
the first question was,
within India collaboration. Are the ministries working together? Are you supporting each other?
yeah, for COVID solutions, they certainly all have come together in a very seamless way. Okay, so that's happening, and the reason that I pointed out for it is because, look, our target, our objectives are very clear, and since we need to get there very fast, so the different aspects of that problem can be looked at and contributed and solved by different departments and ministries. So that is happening. So if you take, for example, well, even within the Ministry of Science and Technology, you have three things: CSIR, DBT, DST. the Principal Scientific Advisor's Office, there's ICMR, there's ICAR, and all of this, even DAE, Atomic Energy, DRDO, all of them are basically doing their bit and also working together to solve a bigger problem.
Um, Next up, sir,
So,
you know,
so
there's
question is that with this experience, we
right.
can do more of it as we go in the future. So now, for example, one would appreciate the value of it much more. At the same time, in terms of cultural appreciation of what it brings on table, but at the same time, we would also know more about the structure and processes which are required for it. So it's just that it is true. Our prime minister always said that we ought not to work in silos, which should be obvious, right? But there have been silos and there have been turfs, and what you may call protecting the turf. It is something very human. Okay. But now that people see the value and the advantage and benefits of doing this, the only way to convince people is when they see that they get more out of it than they lose, right? And so I think with this example that they would learn more of it. I have no doubt about it. So anyway, in last 5 years, 6 years, there's always been a progression in that direction, and I think that this would gain more momentum going forward. This kind of approach will gain more momentum, more appreciation, how to do it, not just why to do it, and that's an important aspect.
India scored very high in COVID-19 times with its diplomatic efforts, and Prime Minister has been speaking to a lot of countries everywhere from the developed world, whether it's US, Israel, UK. We've been sending hydrochloroquine and APIs to countries, including developing nations.
Hmm.
But what does this circumstance drive you to do as a development partner, as a leading country now to smaller nations? Is this going to enhance your cooperation, for example, with Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia? And are you doing something in that direction?
See, of course, at this moment, every society and nation are very busy. Okay, we must understand that this is, so the normal rules of engagement and cooperation do not apply. So while
Right,
one is doing all of this, to give you an example, now there are so many models of PPEs, even the new something very new ideas. I have looked at, for example, myself into a biodegradable PPE which has been developed. There are several versions of PPEs which are antiviral coated and so on. There are several ways of recycling and reusing PPEs. All of this has happened within 1 month, right? But it didn't happen for
yep,
last 2 years, right? So now, and also now, many of these are getting into production and manufacturing. For example, if we are producing 100,000 PPEs per day, is very soon going to be 1 million PPEs per day, just within a question of month and a half, right? So it is at that speed that things are moving, and certainly once you have all this capacity that you can supply to your people, health workers and so on, anything that we produce excess certainly will go to help all the other countries. Africa for sure. You yourself, Manish, has been working with Rwanda program, and now perhaps with Ethiopia program and so on. So many of these things, there we need more people who are proactive in that direction, so that many of the relevant technologies, what is relevant in India could be relevant in another 100 countries, right?
true.
And so certainly there is a big scope, there is a very big canvas out there, which tells us that we should take these things everywhere where they would find value, and so that is happening.
So you
So
were
example I gave, there are so many good models of ventilators, right? Today you can
right,
actually make ventilators, the elementary things which provide support at home, basically for lung functioning, basically oxygenators of different kinds. You can make them for as inexpensively as 10,000 rupees, so it becomes
right.
affordable. Even the ventilators that we use in ICUs, most of them are imported. They cost 6 lakh plus, right?
Uh,
But now these new models, the one that came from IIT Kanpur, this is equally good, maybe even better in terms of technical parameters and so on, and it cost half as much, right? And this is now going to be going into production. So while all these years we didn't really think very much, I mean, we could have done it 10 years ago. I
Right.
see, I see no reason why it can happen today, but could not happen 5 years ago, right? This is the most amazing thing to my mind. Okay, so how is it that there is a convergence, a rapid convergence of all the capacity that was latent, right, which could be activated in such a short time with so much commitment, right, and accountability. So those are the new elements going forward, and certainly all of this would be helpful to other countries, to our neighbors elsewhere, Africa, Southeast Asia, and so on. These are good technologies which are relevant, which are inexpensive, right, and they are right for us, and so therefore they would be right for many other nations.
Now, two questions that have come up, which is not necessarily DST, but they probably pertain to, in general, science and technology, and very specific to COVID-19. What is the progress? Where do we really stand with these rapid tests? Can we get the testings made in India that will function perfectly and we'll get the right results and they'll be cheap and effective and in the right count so that millions of people can be tested?
Yeah, even though said it's maybe not a DST question, but actually it is.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of the institutes of DST is called Sri Chitra Institute of Medical Science and Technology in Thiruvananthapuram. They've done amazing things in a very short time. So starting starting from swabs that collect samples,
Yeah.
right? You not believe even those are imported and we were in short supply.
Oh,
Okay, now they are going to be, what they need is a polymer and a right kind of stick with right kind of flexibility and so on. Okay, now that's going into production. Second thing, you see, testing is not a single thing.
yeah.
Okay, testing is again a chain like everything else. And if there is a weakness in that chain somewhere, it doesn't matter what your last step is, you are not going to get there
Right.
on numbers. So I'm starting from the right from the beginning about collection of samples. The second one is the medium in which you transport the virus, and it
Yeah.
should be alive, right? Even that medium was being imported, and you see if your RNA degrades, if your virus goes inactivated while you are transporting it, then the chances of false readings in the test are going to increase, right? So now they have designed this new medium, right? And the cost of both of these about half of what we were getting so far. The third step is to prepare your RNA sample. Now, the RNA sample, the world over, is prepared in one way, right? You break open the virus, you collect all the stuff from there, then you take some drop from here and put in PCR. Now, there's a new innovation. Now, this new innovation is very simple. If you take these RNA fragments and stick in some magnetic nanoparticles on it, and then pull all of them using a magnet, right? So basically, all the RNA are tagged with magnetic, little small magnets. Apply a magnetic field, pull all of them in one direction, so you get much more RNA material out there to begin with. Is far more concentrated, right? A very simple thing, and again, it's happening now. It's going to production. This is something. It's a global technology, right?
Well,
So it doesn't matter if you, no matter where you use PCR machine, you have to first prepare the sample, right? Whole lot of trick in that, and then finally you make use of PCR. But there is also a new platform which has been developed in India, which is called LAMP. It is undergoing extensive test now, and if it comes through, you remember some a new platform like LAMP. It would have taken many years, not only in India but anywhere else. This was done simply because these scientists were so enthusiastic. They were working 24 hours a day, roll up their sleeves, and they said, "Look, we know how to test for TB. Why can't we use the same platform for testing for COVID?" Right? So all the stuff was right there, and they could make it happen. Now, you see, if this test, when it comes through, this would be 10 times cheaper, as accurate as PCR, and 10 times faster, right? So this would be a global breakthrough. I mean, I'm not saying that it probably would happen or not happen. Certainly, given few months, it would happen. Now, how fast it would happen, how long virus would remain in circulation, certainly many breakthroughs are happening, right? And so both there is a very strong message in these breakthroughs about that they can happen also in the peacetime, right? So to say, and of course, virus is with us for some time. We don't know how long, right? So many of these things are going to be very useful for us going forward, and even more important, the confidence and the processes that it gives to our scientists, the sense of purpose that it gives to our scientists, that is going to remain. In fact, after the virus has come and gone, the times it would look, the problems it has posed, they would look like baby food in comparison to what might happen in 50 years in terms of climate change challenges, right? So our long-term challenges still remain the same, virus or no virus. These are the challenges which are related to sustainable development. These are challenges which are related to climate change. These are challenges which are related to finiteness of natural resources, including water, for example. These are challenges, long-term challenges of health, which are related to antibiotics becoming ineffective, right? These are challenges of rise of intelligent machines and how do people actually live with them. What are the major adjustments that would happen in the society? These are the challenges of convergence of technologies, from communication to computing to decision making to action, perception, all of them rolled into one. And and then final frontier, biology is being converged with everything else, right?
Right.
So these overarching big challenges of humanity going forward in the future, they are not going to change because of little worry that we have because of virus now. Virus would come and pass. But what we learn about the ways of doing science, technology, the urgency of it all has to be felt across, right? Is the little thing we all know. If you cook a frog in a pan of water, but very slowly, it would not know the danger until it's too late. Climate change is a little bit like that, right? And so how do we actually not be very complacent about these things when you see that there is a clear and present challenge? How do we actually measure up to that? And I have no doubt that our somewhat latent scientific manpower, knowledge, information, all of that would have a bearing on these questions as we go outside the times of virus.
My final questions are everybody is, we are all locked down, the normal human beings, the simple people. Uh,
Yeah.
you are a man, a senior man in government, you know what's going on inside and what's happening internationally. What's the time frame, if any, on a vaccine? Because ultimately, all of these big things get solved when there is a vaccine and people feel comfortable, they can go back out again, socialize, do business, do their activities.
Yes. There is some famous man who said predictions are very hard, especially about the future. I'm not able to actually find out who exactly said it because it's ascribed to many different people, famous people. Okay, but it's certainly, you see, and vaccine is one of those things where certainly there is no magic ball in which you can look in there and say which month, which year, right? But if we look at things on the horizon, if we look at what is happening, there is good optimism to believe that by the time this year is over, before that we should have some good news to go by.
So, till then, how do we live? Just like this?
Why are you saying that this is not good life? Just, I mean, the way you put it is just like this. I see you are very happy sitting there, right? No, how do
No,
we
Munir,
live?
but
Um,
a lot
Professor,
of us, a lot of us cannot function. If we function, we are susceptible. We get, we get down with things, and there is no cure. So I'm just saying, while you're saying that good news will come before the end of the year, can we be optimistic that it might come sooner because of what's happening in particularly international collaborations that you talked about?
It might come
Professor,
soon.
there is a related question
But
from.
remember, it is not only finding a vaccine, but there are very intense trials. There is a process for it, right? And it is those trials which take far more time than actually the first stuff, the cocktail that people might make. Especially because you are dealing with the safety of very large number of people. So,
Yes.
what would be their impact? What would be their effects? Short term, medium term, long term, right? All of that has to be factored in very clearly. And that's why it takes more time. But it
Will
takes
it?
less time than finding a new drug.
Yeah,
Do you
Munish.
think India is a candidate for manufacturing of the vaccine? Are we collaborating? We've heard stories about Oxford collaborating with India for manufacturing here. Is something going on?
So right now, their collaboration is not only just for manufacturing, that might come later, but also the hunt for vaccine. So there is some, of course, there are global collaborations. India is not the only partner. There
Right.
are partnerships going forward because this is a time of partnerships, right? So in fact, for a long time I heard this stuff in Sanskrit, which says Vasudev Kutumbakam, meaning the whole world is a
Very
family,
true.
was a
Yes.
concept. Right now, you see it in action. You
Yeah.
see it in action because the distances, of course, uh, this is the first century in which it has never been more true, right?
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
communication, transport, all of that has shrunk distances like never before. Plus, when you look at things like virus, when you look at things like climate change, it is clear that these are shared challenges and they
Yeah.
have to be addressed in a shared way. So people become a little selfish, the nations also become a little selfish, and this selfishness, we would have to come out of it sooner than later.
Professor,
Because
there is a hello.
Go ahead.
Professor, yeah, we have a question from Mr. Timothy Witcher. He's the South Asia Bureau Chief of the French news agency AFP and also Vice President of the Foreign Correspondents Club. His question is, what advances are being made on tests? Some
yes,
experts say that as a vaccine will take at least an year, a cheap and simple test will be crucial to get the economy and travel going again. Is there any hope for this?
absolutely. So I think there we are 100% sure that there is hope on short horizon. So there are many rapid advances, of course, globally, but also happening in India. So there are the advances which are related to antigen based testing. The advances related to antibody based testing. As we know that sometimes these kits have not been very successful, but their accuracy is increasing. And even some companies, we are now supporting both startups as well as established companies in making these tests. And they have been approved by ICMR. I'm not talking about the imported I'm talking about the ones which are being made here, right? So these are rapid diagnostics, but even rapid diagnostics, even like things like what is comparable to PCR testing. Even
Hmm.
there are great advances. I talked about a new platform called LAMP, very
Lamp.
promising. Another platform which is called based on CRISPR and then PCR is also going to cut down on cost as well as time in a huge way. So certainly aviation sector, train travel, mall shopping, schools, colleges, all of that. Going forward, we require no two ways about it. We require testing on a scale which is inexpensive and rapid. And certainly, I have no doubt that this is going to happen. There are, of course, new kits for testing in PCR machines, and those kits which are maybe cost less than half of what they are costing now. I mean, of course, there is no single cost today, it's a whole spectrum. But
Yes.
I'm looking at actually cost level, which should be order of 500 rupees or so. Okay,
Okay.
so that is the cost basis that one is looking at. At the same time, having accurate test, at the same time having fast test, and having machines which are inexpensive, even point of care test. So there are many different fronts which have opened up for diagnostics, and there things are looking really good.
So
Good.
would you say that we'll be ready to go to school, to travel, to go to work by maybe, if not this month, next month after testing is in place?
Yes, this is our target indeed.
In
So
June.
whether June, July, something like that, something like that. But this is something. There's a question that I'm not, fully qualified to answer, because the reason is there is a science and technology dimension to it, certainly,
Hmm.
but there are many other dimensions to it. So it is the entire will of the society, right, which plays a very major role in this. So there are, what I'm saying, there are societal dimensions, there are many different dimensions to this, and science and technology is one aspect of it, which is the enabling aspect, which means saying, do we have the test, right?
Hmm.
So science and technology only works on saying, are we going to have tests which are right, right? And so on that question, I'm very optimistic.
Okay.
Okay, how they would translate, those tests would translate into actions on different fronts. Okay, this is a multi-dimensional problem.
We have one more question, Professor. This is from Ashok B. Sharma. He wants to know how many vaccines and drugs are at what stage of development and by which companies at home and globally.
Yeah, right. There's a kind of question, which we supply written answers to.
Okay.
A long winding answer, but
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, if you send the question, as in terms of a portal, electronic portal, all kind of COVID related questions, related to science and technology, they come to us. There is a portal for asking these questions. You can submit this question. You see, this would run into many, dozens of pages.
Okay.
What is the technology, what is the company, what stage they are in. Of course, this information would be incomplete, because you never know what company is at what stage. They don't tell you,
All
right?
right. Okay.
But
Professor,
those companies that those are supported, either they are government, PSUs, or they are supported by the government, we have better handle, at least in India, to know what stage they are in.
okay. I have a question, Professor. You know, you are making the point that most of the research that takes place in our laboratories and institutions like CSIR and DRDO and DAE and so on, they get stuck at the laboratory level. They are not put to use, they are not taken up for mass production. In America, I found universities like Harvard, Yale, Stanford, even ordinary middle level universities have an exclusive department where their business is to make their research known to different companies across America and elsewhere. And if any company likes a particular discovery, they take it up and they produce it, and they pay a certain amount of royalty to the university, and the person who has done the research also gets a considerable amount of money. In a city like Boston, you have all the Nobel Prize winners living in a millionaire's row, but in India, if you work for the government and if you come up with a research, if it gets into mass production, the scientist who comes up with the discovery does not get anything out of it. Is there some way of promoting some certain amount of self-interest for the persons who are coming up with interesting research and then taking it to companies in the private sector or the government sector, so that they are produced and taken to the people at large, at home and abroad, Professor?
Yes, a very good question, and indeed, this is a question that everybody has been chasing for a long time. Now, so there are different aspects to this question. You had talked about Boston, for example. In fact, once I was passing through Boston, then a company guy, I don't know how he found out that I was passing through Boston. He came to visit me in the hotel.
Okay.
I had not approached him,
Acha.
right? And he said that he knows that I can solve this problem for him, right?
Uh-huh.
He must have looked at my website and all this stuff, right? I done some scouting. So I told him, I said, look, but I can solve this problem for you, but I'm a little bit far. There is MIT in front of you here. I know some guy who can also solve this problem for you. I call him and you go meet him. He said, I know that that professor can solve my problem, but before I enter his office, I have to put in $100,000 check on his table. Right? So he was quite candid about it. Now, you see, this is where I got the idea. Another thing, that similar experience it happened. One day, I just in my lab, 5 people from Japan turned up and they said, we are making this machine for photolithography, and I know that you can actually make this. There's a next generation machine for these big companies. I don't know how they never contacted me actually. They just turned up there. They put the money on table and they said, you do this work stuff. And okay, it's a long story, but the point I'm saying is, this is where I saw that Lakshmi chasing Saraswati.
Right.
This is what happens in MIT, this is what happens in Stanford. So while there is some push factor, you are very right in saying that we need to empower our scientists, right?
Exactly.
And we need to empower our institutions to basically bring out all of these strengths which are hidden. But you see, that I know that in IITs it is no longer an issue. So what you said has already happened, right? So the professors there can start a company, they can mentor a startup, they can be director in the company, they can be founder in the company, and they can take, okay, whatever is rightly theirs, right, according to the rules that they have in every IIT. So that
Okay.
has already happened. Second thing, there are incubators in all of these IITs now. Third thing, that they indeed have an office of the kind that you were talking to me about, and
Okay.
CSIR is doing it right now. So therefore, there is some amount of push that people have recognized the value of knowledge latching on to market. But now it is the market which also has to respond with equal enthusiasm.
Right.
And I have the exact analysis of this problem. Okay, scientific analysis, so to say, as
Okay.
to why it is not happening in intensity now, what needs to be done for it to happen, and I think it's going to happen more. I haven't any doubt about it, because just I have seen the change in my own life. Right, it was not like that 20 years ago, 25 years ago. A lot more companies now approach, for example, IITs, and work with them. In just last 5 years before I came to Delhi, I must have worked with about 10 companies,
Okay.
and in scale. So we still, maybe our with the numbers that we need are not maybe sufficient, the scale to match the problems that we have, the number of problems. But also it has a lot to do with the culture. You see, in the culture in our industry typically has been not driven by knowledge, right? It was, see, people did not make profit because of knowledge. They
Yeah.
did not have to compete globally, right? The whole point is they didn't see value in it. They say, अभी R&D क्या है, 4 साल बाद कुछ आएगा. Why, I can't invest. My board is not in favor of this. Right? This investment, if I, instead of R&D, if I put in money lending, it can make me more money. If I say, look, if I have to take loan from bank, what is the interest rate? Shouldn't it be better for me just to buy technology? See, all these are complex questions which are depending on market forces,
Right.
right? There's no simple answer to this. So therefore, there has to be incentives on both sides for industry also to come on board. If those industries which have to be globally competitive, they have no other way to go but R&D, right? And this is why when you gave examples of American or some companies here there are companies which are based totally on R&D. If there was no R&D, they will be wiped off the face of this earth in 2 years,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
So that critical factor has to be there.
So one question has come up again. Maybe you can answer it. Is we have, while the size of a country is 1.3 billion people, but we haven't done comparative numbers of testing. Maybe because we were not getting enough imported kits, or we were hoping that we'll develop some domestic kits. Um, When is this going to change?
No, no, kit we have already developed, and in fact, is being manufactured at a scale. I give you one example. A company in Pune, which is making PCR kits, they were making 10,000 kits a day, then 30,000 a day. Now they are transiting to 100,000 a day. There is just one company, right? And this has been supported by our technology development board for them to actually scale up very quickly. And there are many such examples. So there are two aspects to your question. The first one is, who do we test? There has to be a strategy. I mean, this cannot be random, right? So that strategy, there has been a certain strategy in saying, look, this is who we will test, right? ICMR came up with this strategy, taking into account our constraints and having a good rational approach to these things. As our constraints change, as the scale of virus changes, so it's a dynamic situation as to what strategy would is best for testing is a totally dynamic situation. And so this might change in the future, and it will change in the future, right? And so therefore we need to match it with the resources, with the amount of kits which are available, testing, experts which are available for testing, different kind of testing. Even the same kind of testing does not suit all the needs, right? So there's the antibody test. Okay, this is for a certain need. So people mostly don't understand what the difference between the rapid test, antibody test, PCR test, LAMP test, whatever are. They address different questions in testing. So if you want to know if you have live virus in your body now, you do PCR or LAMP testing. If you want to know whether there was virus in your body but may have left it now, so that you were infected at some point, then you do antibody testing. But also, if the virus has not produced antibodies yet, then this antibody test will not produce. They'll give you a clean chit, for example, right? And so there are pros and cons of different kind of tests. It depends on what you're going to get out of those tests, right? What kind of planning would actually depend on those tests. And so this is a little complicated matter. um, and also that's why there's a lot of modeling, etc., which is very helpful. I talked about the modeling efforts right in the beginning, because you see, how do you decide? So you decide, of course, based on your gut feeling. You decide based on evidence. You decide based on how things are moving, changing, and so on. So basically, you need to know 10 days from now, where do you think I would be? And so our strategy must be matching those insights.
But
And I have no doubt that this is going to change.
but if we don't test in large numbers, how would we know what we are containing, how we are containing?
But that's the question. There's a question I was addressing. You are
Yeah.
right that if we see, so there are. This is one view. Okay, that if you don't test everybody, look, ideal world will test everybody, right? Okay, but even that's not enough, because then the next critic will come and say, yeah, yeah, but you test them yesterday. Now today there are 10,000 new cases. They would start the chain again of transmission, right? So testing certainly plays a very important role, but it's not 100% solution to everything, right? And also the fact that I mean, ideal world, you may test everybody every hour, every day, and so on. But it's not practical actually to do that. It will never be practical. It'll never be practical in any country, okay, not just India. And so therefore you need to have a strategy which says, look, what, what is the greatest value in testing what people, and then what would be the action that would actually emanate from there.
So are you saying that we test based on at least some symptoms, so that if a person requires a cure, that testing goes to the cure?
Yeah, yeah, but that's already happening. That's part of the strategy now. So
That's the
if
strategy
if you're
now.
screened in for certain symptoms, then you go ahead and do testing,
Mhm.
right? So that's already there. This is what you call limited testing. Limited testing based on certain approach. right? So initially, you would recall the approach was everybody was coming from outside,
Yeah.
because we knew that those were the likely carriers, because the virus didn't evolve here, is
Yeah.
basically coming from outside. So you basically focus on people who are coming from outside. After a while, you start focusing on other people, right? So you see, if somebody is tested positive, then you test everybody who hasn't been in contact with this person who is tested positive. So that's a strategy, right? So it's limited, not to everybody who's walking around, but saying, okay, if this guy is tested positive, then what are the likely people that he may have infected,
Mhm.
right? So you test all of them, and this is what is happening now.
So my final question is: everybody's worried about the economy now. We are part of COVID-19. Like you say, viruses come, viruses go. This shall pass. But do you think, coming to you, science, technology, innovation, and what we are doing very fast and furiously to come up with solutions and cross sectors, do you think that this will help? Otherwise, the economy, which is going to take a big hit and tank. I mean, do you see that this being a positive push, science,
No,
technology
all,
for us?
all depends. You see, we haven't yet seen all of future. Certainly, there is a big impact on economy. I mean, everybody knows that, right? Now, what is the extent of that impact and the recovery, right? The recovery period and the scale, that is still is too early to actually predict all of that. What you can predict is the damage which already has happened, right? And but you cannot predict what more is going to pile up there, and not completely, but certainly we have made now a good decision on going back to the economy. There's always this balance, as you know, between this aspect of virus and the economy. It's fairly clear. It's just like sustainable development.
Right.
Sometimes I tell people sustainable development is an oxymoron, because sustainability and our sense of what is development are in perpetual conflict,
With each
right? Now, this is the way we have defined development. In fact, going forward in the future, I would say, I mean, the human beings would be totally stupid if they do not change their idea about development and even what we call economy. I mean, you look back, pre-virus days, isn't everything under frenzy? Is not everything under superheated? And everybody's saying growth, 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 development, development, no matter how much it is, right?
yeah,
No matter if your family has 3 cars, you are still worried about economy,
yeah,
right? And we have seen this change in our lifetime. Okay, so this spiral has no end. I mean, shouldn't people be actually start thinking about it? That this is a spiral which has a beginning but has no end. And there is no amount of technology that can deal with it. Right? Sooner or later, you are going to run out of resources. Sooner or later, there are going to be constraints on growth. Make no mistakes about it. If
yeah,
anybody else say, "Oh no, no, there's not," we are going to live happily ever after, like just the optimism of 1950s and
yeah.
60s, right? That's not going to happen.
Yep.
So, therefore, a very fundamental question you ask going forward from the times of a virus is, what is it that we have learned from here? Not just learned about, well, okay, doing faster science and so on. To my mind, the biggest lessons of virus or whatever, any challenge or crisis, is actually bigger questions. And we don't deal with bigger questions because we all think we are going to live only another 20 years or 30 years and so on. But even that would produce very big changes, right?
We got
So this whole concept of what we call development and what we call economic growth needs to be looked into in terms of balance in life. Look, a lot of people would not like me if I told you that the first time I used email was in 1982, and I thought that this would solve all my problems through technology. But I was couldn't have been more wrong.
absolutely, absolutely.
Okay,
Professor,
and I
we have
think the same thing about this, right? Man, I could have been not more wrong. In certain things, yes, but in certain, so it's a question of balance, right? Every technology has some light and some shadow. Now, your only hope is that the shadow doesn't make bigger, doesn't become bigger than the light that this technology has produced.
Right.
And I think this is something that people have to, societies as a whole, nations as a whole, must think very committed way about technology is this is good, technology is a way, but it's not going to solve all our problems.
Yeah, Professor, we have one question from Emily Schmal, our South Asia correspondent of Associated Press of America. She is asking, the testing has been done in such a small number of people, in the whole world, India accounts for nearly more than one-fifth of the population, but you have nearly 40 lakh infections across the globe. In India, it's only 52,000. And do you think, herd immunity is happening in India? Do you think that the figures of infected and cured is accurate as it exists? Because we haven't
No, no,
tested.
no. See, no. You look at global data.
Yeah.
They are in the sense in which you are saying, are they accurate? They are not accurate anywhere.
Okay.
You see, there was a limited study done in Santa Clara, California,
Yeah.
which produced that the number of infected people were 50 times larger than what they had caught. Right? It's not
Right.
unique to any nation, right? Because the fact is, you cannot test everybody, right? So, okay, or until that happens, it becomes two paisa test or something like that, right? Which can be done at home, right? Okay, that may happen. I mean, I don't know it will happen or not, but so the point is, um, as far as our testing is concerned, it's like any other nation in that stage of progression of the virus, right? So when you may say we are in an earlier stage, so to say, as compared to nations that have fully progressed through it, right? So if you go back there and say, oh, what was their rate of testing? Maybe not very different. Maybe the strategy for testing maybe not very different. Okay, there may be variations, but there'll always be some people who are doing it this way, some people who are doing that way. Now, as far as the herd immunity is concerned, herd immunity basically happens when something like 70% people, or at least more than 50% people, are already into it. I don't think that we are anywhere near that. So therefore, is it happening in India? Of course, there are other hypotheses. Hypothesis being that perhaps we are more have better immune resistance and so on. Those are many hypotheses which are there. Some people talk about the influence of temperature on the virus, humidity on virus, sunlight on virus. You must have seen that famous press conference by the president of United States, where they had brought in influence of these three factors on virus: the sunlight, the temperature, and the humidity.
Right.
So, are these factors at play in India? Well, these are open questions right now. Okay, one can also argue that okay, even though temperature outside is higher, but our body temperature is always constant, and the reservoir of virus is the body, and then much of the transmission occurs indoors, right? So all of those scientific factors are there. They are still far from being resolved. If you ask the question why maybe there is a less rate of infection in India, I don't think anybody has the answer for that. Of course, the effect of temperature is very drastic. Rather, what was shown in that press conference, temperature in the 70s even were found to be rather effective. Then one of my Indian colleague was saying, "Oh, but 70 is a very high temperature in the 70s." I pointed out to him that in the US they use Fahrenheit, not centigrade. So
That's
Before beyond boiling point.
the
uh,
Fahrenheit in the 70s is just 20s, early 20s in India, centigrade.
right.
Right?
Yes.
So once it gets to 40 degrees, 45 degrees, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that virus cannot survive outdoors under those conditions of sunlight, temperature, etc. But what is the relevance of that for transmission among humans is something that is still need to be worked out.
Right.
Okay.
Well, we want to thank you for your time. It's close to an hour and a half since we started.
Oh,
Uh, we have no, no, and time passed away beautifully. I'm so glad that you took the time and the interest to tell us about the current situation. You are so well informed, and of course, you possess such knowledge that you were able to answer a diversity of our inquisitive questions and curiosity. Thank you very much, Professor Ashutosh Sharma, Secretary of the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. And we appreciate your time. We appreciate the knowledge you've shared with us. We also hope that as soon as you have information about anything that can help us bring life to normal or create more awareness using our communication skills and dissemination skills, that you will pass it on to us. And we'll be happy to welcome you back again and have you with us again. Thank you
certainly,
very much.
certainly. Thank you very much. It's totally enjoyable, talking here, and indeed with diversity of questions, some of which I had thought about only now. Thank you very
Okay.
much. Namaskar.
Professor, Professor, we are getting very interesting comments from all over the world, including somebody, Rao Madhukuri in Warsaw, in Poland.
Uh-huh.
And they all appreciate this is very informative kind of interaction. We would love to have you more often to enlighten our viewers and our members in India and abroad, as more and more interesting things come up and which you think the media and the world ought to know. Thank you so much, Professor.
Certainly.
Have a great day. Bye
Thank you.
bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Thank you. Good night.
Namaskar.